Thank you, Ian, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for being here, and thank you to the festival for allowing me to be here to share some ideas with you. I'm going to be talking about the wonderful world of natural navigation. That is the art of finding our way using nature. And I warn you, it is a weird subject. It is a strange subject. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a very good chance you are the only people in the whole world listening to a talk on this subject right now. So that makes you a little bit strange, but since I've given my whole professional life to this beautiful art, it makes me very odd. So I should start by explaining just a little bit about how I got into this wonderful art. When I was 10 years old, my mother took my sister and me on a summer holiday to the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. And without my knowing, she'd booked me onto a 5-day dinghy sailing course, this exact boat you can see here. I didn't want to do it. I was very shy. My idea of a holiday was not getting on a boat and learning skills that I didn't think I needed, surrounded by people I'd never met before. So I kicked off. I got really grumpy as a 10-year-old can. But my mother, using tactics that only mums know, said, give the first day a go. If you don't like it at the end of the first day, that's fine. You don't have to go back. But give one day a go. Mums are quite clever. On the 5th and final day, the instructor approached my sailing partner and me and asked us a question. Where would you like to go today? It may sound like a simple question. It may sound like a harmless question. But to a 10-year-old, it's an explosive question because there's a secret message there. And it's, I'm not asking you where your parents want you to go. I'm not asking you where your teachers want you to go. I'm asking you where you want to go. So long before I understood the word navigation, I got this sense that there is an art that allows us to shape our own journeys. And every journey you go on for the rest of your lives, you will either be a passenger or a navigator. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a passenger, but every once in a while, I really recommend saying, no, I'm the navigator for this little journey. You'll be pleased to hear that the plan for the next 40 minutes is not me going through every summer holidays for the intervening 41 years, but I will mention a couple of moments. What happened was I fell in love with this idea of shaping my own journeys, and the journeys got a little bit bigger, a bit more challenging. So by my 20s, I was saying to my friends, who wants to get from England to the highest point in North Africa and back without buying a ticket? And most of my friends were sensible, and they said, we're too busy, we've got hair washing and things like that to do. But one friend said, sure, let's do it. And so we took small boats and small planes, and then a 4x4, and then we climbed up into the mountains, and then we took a different route back. And all along, I was just honing this art of shaping my own journeys. And then the journeys got really big, because I'd worked out in my 20s that I was okay at a few things, and I was really quite bad at quite a lot of things. And I thought that might be a more comfortable feeling if I can find one thing I'm really good at. I just wanted to put my head on the pillow at the end of the day and say, there's one thing I can do really well. And so I thought, if somehow I can manage to fly solo and sail single-handedly across the Atlantic, then that surely will have proven to myself, never mind anybody else, I wasn't worried about anybody else, just proved to myself there is one thing in this world that I can do quite well. And so it involved coming in low over a glacier in Greenland. One small mistake and I'd be dead. It involved looking up at waves that were higher than the length of my boat. And these experiences did make me feel alive. But over the course of the years, and it took many years to build these skills, whilst working in other jobs, of course, I came to appreciate that some of the thrill had gone. Some of the excitement I'd felt as a 10-year-old had disappeared. Last night, I'm sure many of you heard Sir Ben Oakley talking about, he sort of was interested in physics and he approached physics, but then he saw the poetry disappear. And that really resonated for me, because that's exactly what was happening for me in navigation. The journeys were getting bigger and bolder and more adventurous and edgier, and yet some of the poetry, some of the magic had definitely disappeared. I had to learn how to use GPS, of course, But I've honestly lost count of all the three-letter acronyms that I had to learn. GPS, DAME, ILS, VOR, ADF. I could go on and on and on. And that's not where the beauty of Shaping Journeys was. This photo was taken during the solo transatlantic flight. And it became all about screens and dials. And I thought to myself, where has the magic gone? And I was familiar because I'd read a lot. And reading stories is one of the best ways we can immerse ourselves deep into an area. When we feel a passion calling, when we're kind of flirting, when we're courting with something, stories are one of the best ways for us to understand which way to go within that passion. And through stories, I was very aware that all cultures in the world had learned how to find their way without things like GPS. So we've got Arab navigators, we've got people like the Bedouin, we've got the Vikings, we've got the Greek navigators, but any civilization in the world will have learned how to find their way without using instruments. And so I started to investigate this area, and instead of doing big journeys, I started to do very, very small ones, really small, under 1 kilometer. So I'd gone from thousands of kilometers down to under 1 kilometer. And bang, the magic was suddenly back because I was stopping and I was looking at scenes like this. It's an oak tree. And I just want to share with you some of the early signs I was using. I just want to share that feeling, and I hope you get some of it. If you ask somebody to draw a tree, it doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 95 years old, they will draw a symmetrical tree. There is not one symmetrical tree on planet Earth. Of the billions of trees, not one of them is symmetrical. And in that, we find clues. So look at this tree here. Not symmetrical. Bigger on the right-hand side as we look at it. That's telling us more light has come from the right-hand side. And natural navigation is one giant, beautiful jigsaw puzzle. Okay, more light from the right-hand side. We get most of our light from the south. The sun is due south in the middle of the day, every day of the year. Okay, so south is to the right, so we're looking east. And all I've been doing over the last 25 years is a treasure hunt, a fun collection of the things that help us find our way. So that is one of them, but trees are so wonderful. Let's have a look at a couple more. So here, just see if you get a sense of direction. We've got more branches on the left-hand side telling us more light from the left-hand side, but notice the angles of the branches. Can you see how they are closer to horizontal on the left-hand side and closer to vertical on the right-hand side? This is something I call the tick effect, or a check if you're from the Americas. And the branches on the south side go out towards the southern light, horizontal, and on the north side they can only get light from above, so they go up towards the sky. One more compass. But every single part of a tree, there are over 20 ways we can navigate using trees. But one more for fun. Actually, maybe two more. Leaves. We think they're all a bit samey. But no, if you pause and look, on the south side of trees, there's more light. The tree grows different types of leaves. Sun leaves, they're smaller and lighter in color. On the north side, it's shaded. We get shade leaves. They're bigger, darker, and thinner. They feel different. I like to think of the elements, the sun, wind, rain, and a few other things, leaving footprints on the land all around us, not least on the trees. So when the wind is shaping everything around us, the trees give us some of our best messages. The long-term effects you can see here, the wind has come from the left. So all we have to do, wherever we are in the world, is start to tune into where the wind comes from, and the trees will give us direction back. That's natural navigation's bargain. We give curiosity to our surroundings, and they give us help back. So in my part of the world, the winds come from the southwest. So if I saw this in England, it would mean southwest is to the left. You know, in Romania, I know you get a lot of strong winds from the northeast. So if the trend is that, northeast would be to the left. But in a sense, it doesn't matter. It's more the pausing, noticing, and thinking about it. Of course, the animals have been doing this for hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And they're no fools. You know, they didn't even have to read the stories about the ancient Greeks to know this stuff. If a spider spins a web, it's not random. Nothing is random. Everything is part of this glorious puzzle. So we get more spiders' webs on the sheltered side of trees and buildings, walls, things like that. So the animals will make a compass. They'll also make a map. We'll come back to that. Not many people talk about natural navigation. I'm trying hard to change that. But if they do, they talk about moss grows on the north side of trees. But moss is actually quite an expert technique. You can navigate with moss, but it's not a beginner's technique. As you can see here, moss doesn't wake up in the morning thinking, I'll grow on the north side of things. It grows where there's moisture. So it's quite a tricky technique. But lichens are fantastic. You can navigate using lichens today because they are so fussy. And fussiness, particularness in nature it's a superpower because it means whenever we see something in nature being fussy, it's not just whispering, it's shouting a message at us. So in this picture here, I was crossing a volcanic landscape in La Palma in the Canary Islands. And lunchtime every day, the cloud base would lower and I get surrounded by mist. But I'd given the landscape a bit of curiosity. And the rains come in from the northeast on these islands. And all the lichens I saw, I never knew their name. I don't know their name to this day. Names are not important in natural navigation. Pausing, being curious, noticing patterns, this is important. But names, take them or leave them. It really doesn't matter. There is no such thing as a right name for anything in nature. There are 20 different names. Choose one, make one up, doesn't matter. But I was able to cross this island very easily. And we can cross cities, we can cross wildernesses by making friends with the lichens. And sometimes, if we're lucky, the two things will pair up. So this is looking down vertically onto a round stone. And you can see on the bottom half, got a very bright lichen. If you see a bright lichen, if it looks like a lichen is trying to give you sunlight back, it means it's had lots of sunlight. It's more likely to be on the sunny south side. Mosses need water, so they are slightly more likely to be on the north side. But if you see the two together, the jigsaw is coming together very, very nicely. Here is a plant you will all recognize, of course. If things make us go, ow, we tend to recognize them and come up with names quite quickly. The stinging nettle. And it's making a beautiful compass and a map for us. Now, the compass is quite simple. I'm sure as you look at it, you're starting to get a sense of direction already. There are no tricks here. Looks like more light has come from the right, and it has. South is to the right. We're looking east. You're getting good at this, aren't you? What about the map, though? So the key to making a map with plants and animals is to understand that they are all specialists. There is no plant or animal that gets up each day and goes, I'm just going to do a bit of everything. I don't really care. Whatever happens, let's go with the flow. Unfortunately, it's brutal out there. That strategy does not work at all. If a species is laid back, another species comes along with sharp elbows and says, I'll have this spot. So whenever we see any species, we pause, we're curious, and we just say to it, what is your specialty? What is your thing? What do you need? And the stinging nettle talks back and it says, I need nutrient-rich soil. I need nitrates and phosphates. And we say, that sounds a bit dry and unhelpful. Can you just explain that to me a bit more? So the stinging nettle goes, okay, most soil doesn't have lots of nitrates and phosphates in it. But human beings change the soil. The way we live, the way we work, the way we farm, the way we die changes the soil. It makes it rich in nitrates and phosphates. So stinging nettles are a sign there are human beings nearby. It's a map. So if you walk in the wilderness, you can walk in the wilderness for 3 hours and not see one stinging nettle. But the second you're getting near a village or a town or a farm, suddenly there are stinging nettles. They're a guarantee you're getting near. If you see lots of stinging nettles, they're a guarantee you're getting near human beings. And this is really what I would love you to do. If you haven't tried this, after today, just start to make very, very simple maps. Simple but powerful. So every time you see some water with plants near it, you don't need names. You might have your own names for them. You might say, oh, those are willow trees. But it doesn't matter if you have no name, because all you have to do is say to yourself, I'm seeing those trees next to water. You can say it out loud. You'll get some funny looks, but that comes with the business here. So just say, okay, those trees, water. and then you walk away, maybe you go uphill a tiny bit, and you go, oh, the trees have changed. You go, these are trees in a dry area. Okay, trees, wet area, dry. And then the magic really starts to happen because our brain is brilliant at pairing things with meaning. Now, I'm going to be rude to all of us in this room, including me. We're not very impressive as a species. We're not very fast. We're not very strong. Our senses, not that impressive. But we are very, very good at interpreting things, at solving puzzles, much, much better than animals. This is what we were born to do. Spoiler alert, we were not born to stare at smartphones. We were born to notice patterns and for that to help us in some way. It helped every single one of our ancestors to survive. Every single one of all of our ancestors could do this, and our genes have not changed. So we can all do this. It's a cultural choice whether we do it, but we can all do it. So that's all I want you to do, is start pairing things, and the magic really happens when your brain says, I think I'm better at this than you are, and it will give you the answer before you ask the question. So I promise you, if you just practice, once or twice over the next few weeks, once a week for a month maybe, just going, oh, I see those trees next to water, then something extraordinary will happen. Because you will be walking along and you're not interested in water and you're not thinking about trees. And your brain will just tap you on the shoulder and say, there's water over there, before you've seen the water. And that's how our ancestors saw landscapes. If you ask an indigenous person how they find water, they don't look for water. They look for the way the plants and animals change. And then, as I mentioned, natural navigation is just a fantastic jigsaw. We're just bringing two simple pieces together to make a slightly more beautiful picture. All animals depend on plants. So whenever we see an animal, we can start the conversation. Which plants do you need? This is a peacock butterfly. It depends on stinging nettles. We know the stinging nettle. We know the map it makes. Now in England, we like to go for a walk in the countryside to a pub in a village. You may have very similar traditions here. Something we like to do on Sundays. And so if you're walking to a bar, a restaurant, a pub for lunch, this butterfly is the butterfly that tells you to get your drinks order ready. Because you're getting near the stinging nettles, you're getting near the village, you're getting near the pub. I'm going to give you an example of how a little bit of curiosity and using our senses creates a superpower. The BBC contacted me quite a few years ago and said, can you find your way using natural navigation anywhere in the British Isles? And I said, yes, straight away. Why did I say it so fast? Because I needed the work. But I put the phone down and I thought, ooh, this could get interesting. So we drove into Wales and they led me into a valley. And I didn't know what was coming next. But I thought, it is going to get interesting. So I had every reason to feel more curious and to have my senses tuned than normal. And as we walked into the valley, I just looked up at the side, and this is what I saw. I thought, okay, just going to pause here, and I'm going to give this landscape a bit of curiosity. And I noticed something. I don't know if you've seen it, but these rocks, the slate rocks, again, the name of the rocks doesn't matter, but I just noticed a pattern. I just noticed that the rocks weren't horizontal. There was an angle there, and there were lines going up towards the right. And then I looked to the right, it was the middle of the day, there was the sun, and I just made a mental note. Okay, I've been curious, I've used my senses. Okay, there are lines going up towards south. We walked further into the valley, and at this point, we met up with a safety team, and they handed me a helmet with a head torch on it. And I thought, oh, this is not good. This is not good. Sure enough, we're going down into a mine, and I thought, this is going to fall apart. It's a question of when this goes wrong, not if. And for a lot of the time, we were in darkness. The safety consultant was at the front, and we'd have a hand on the person in front. Left and right and twists and turns and down deeper into the darkness of this mine. 3 or 4 levels we went down, left and right and twists and turns. And honestly, I had no idea which way was which. But then the cameras start rolling, and the presenter says to me, you can turn your head torch on now, and you're going to have to tell us which way is which, and you can do it with me. I turned my head torch on, I saw that, and I went south that way, north that way. And the safety consultant, who was one of the only people in the world who knew this mine, looked at me like it was some sort of dark magic. But you all did it. It's not tricky, but the first bit is important. The curiosity, using your senses. You can't get down in the mine and then rewind the tape. So you have to pause and give the time. There was another time a TV company said to me, we've seen some of the things you've done. We're going to make your life even more uncomfortable now. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to your home, and we're going to kidnap you, and then we're going to blindfold you, and then we're going to put you on a boat, and then we're going to take you out on this fast boat into the ocean. Then we're going to take your blindfold off, and using only the stars, you have to work out exactly where you are. And then we're going to give you an envelope. You open the envelope, it'll have the name of a destination on it, and you've got to guide the boat to that destination. And it went well. It was okay. It was okay. It wasn't perfect. It went well. But I don't want to talk about, I used a sextant to work out where we were, and it's a good skill, but I don't want to talk about it because it's an instrument. And however traditional it is, it's not as much fun as using nature. So instead of talking about the stars, there are lots of fun star methods. But instead of that, I want to share one that you can use, over the next weeks. If you see a crescent moon, it is a fast, rough compass. You just imagine a line that touches the horns of the crescent. So a straight line touches the top horn, goes down to the bottom horn. You keep that straight line going down to the ground, you'll be looking roughly south. Only roughly, but it's fast, it's easy. And most importantly, it's fun. This is my friend Amgar. He's a nomad in the Libyan Sahara. I say friend, but he's let me down. Since we spent some quite interesting time together in 2009, he's not on Facebook, he's not on Instagram, he's not on Snapchat. Our communication is not good. But we walked across 150 kilometers of the Libyan Sahara together, myself and two nomads, Amgar and Cardero. And they taught me the importance of understanding the shape of the sand dunes. Because again, the elements are leaving footprints on the landscape. When the wind blows, it makes one side hard and a shallow angle. That's the side I'm standing on in this picture. And the other side is known as the slip face. It's steep and soft. So if you've tuned in, if you've worked out where the winds have been coming from, every single sand dune is a compass. But what I didn't see coming was some parts of the Omani government got in touch with me and said there are young people in Oman who don't understand these things. It is very ironic that a Brit is asked to go to Oman and teach Omanis about sand, but that is what happened. And this is what I'm showing them here in this picture, because it's not just about mighty sand dunes. These patterns are a universal language. They're the same all over Earth, and indeed, probably all over the solar system and even the universe. We see these same shapes on planet Mars. So once you understand that whenever wind blows over sand, and it's not just sand, it can be snow, it can be dust, it can even be little bits of leaves. You see the same patterns. And so here, the wind has been coming from the left. We've got slightly firmer, darker sand on the left of the ridge, softer, lighter sand on the right-hand side. Tiny little compasses. And this is a photo I took, just half an hour from where I live near the south coast of England. Exactly the same patterns. So that's one of the things I really, really want you to take away, is these are not skills for when you're somewhere wild. I've had, interesting times going to interesting places to bring these skills back, but I have more fun using them close to home. And I want you to as well. Here's a really, really quick desert map for you. What I learned is amongst desert cultures, it's very, very hard to ask how long we've got to go. But when you've been walking for 10 hours in the desert, you're quite keen to know how far it is. You have to get somewhere where the camels can get some water and some feed. That's the way desert travel works. But I tried asking a few times, and I never got a useful answer. And I got the impression that the Tuareg saw the question a little bit like when the child is on the back seat in the car going, "Are we nearly there yet?" So I stopped asking. Instead, I relied on the flies. If there's no flies on the person in front of you, you're going to be walking for at least 2 hours. If there are 2 or 3 flies, it's maybe under 2 hours. And if you see this many flies, you're nearly there. It's just the other side of the rocks. By all means, ask me my advice about navigation, but do not ask me for advice on fashion, because this is what I wear for a summer holiday. A few years ago, I persuaded a different friend that we needed to sail from Scotland up into the Arctic. And I wanted to understand whether the Viking methods I'd read about many years before, I wanted to understand if they worked. And so we sailed from Scotland up into the Arctic Circle and then down again. And as we were near Iceland, the boat got half knocked over by what are known as katabatic winds. This is where the air on snowy mountains is very cold and dense, and it rolls down and knocks the boat over. And I took this photo during those gusts, and it's one of my favorite photos, not because of the wind, but because of the sun. Now, we've all seen lots of beautiful sunrises and sunsets, I hope, but this is midnight. You can only see that at midnight if you're in the Arctic. So it is one of my favorite photos. But I don't like it as much as I like this photo, which looks at first very boring, very dull. But there is one thing on this photo that is quite exciting for a navigator. One word in particular. To the left of the line, we've got blue, and we've got information about how deep the sea is. What we've done is sailed to this place off the northwest coast of Iceland, and we decided to turn the electronics on because we knew the answer we'd get. And the answer we got is, don't know. Because the word there, near bottom left, unsurveyed, this is just the boat equivalent of a car sat-nav, of course. You can see the black shape is us. The computer is basically saying, I do not have a map. This is literally uncharted territory. There is no paper map. There is no electronic map. So however good the electronics are, there are still places in the world where there is no map. And we were finding our way by I had my friend John on the bow, and he was calling out patterns and colors. And we were finding our way very much like the Vikings, which was the aim. I wrote an academic paper, and you can all access it for free. It's very easy. It's called Nature's Radar. If you just Google my name and Nature's Radar, you'll be able to get hold of it. And it's explaining how, during that expedition, we were trying to prove that the Viking methods of working out where land is using animals works. So there's lots and lots of data in it, but it boils down to if you count more than 10 birds in 5 minutes, you're within 40 miles of land. It was a long trip for a simple method. But that's really what natural navigation boils down to. It doesn't matter how we get the knowledge. It doesn't matter where it comes from. The key is understanding that there is meaning in everything we sense, even if it's as simple as counting birds. And everything we see closer to home, if we choose to be curious, we will find a pattern. Every single one of these pictures here is taken fairly near my home, within an hour's walk of my home. And they're each forming a beautiful compass. But the ones I'm seeing aren't as important to me right now as the ones I want you to go out there and look for. Look for asymmetry. The two sides of anything look different. Pause, ask why. And sometimes you'll get a very clear message back. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to understand. But in both cases, it's fantastically useful because you're asking your brain to do what it was born to do. I once traveled to the heart of Borneo in small boats. It's quite tricky. You're going against these fast rivers up rapids for 10 days to get into the heart of Borneo. The roads don't work. The rains are too heavy. So if they build a road, it's gone within a year. So you have to go on these boats. And to meet the Dayak tribespeople there, it involved eating more frogs than a nutritionist would recommend, and involved peeling leeches off my bloodied skin until every bit of clothing I had was covered in blood. And I left after the expedition. I left with one very simple insight, which we can all use from today onwards, which is the beauty of gradient. Whenever you're walking, if you're in the middle of a city or in the wildest place on earth, if you notice things going uphill or downhill, you just pause and say, why? Because the Dayak can walk for days across wild territory, places they've never seen before. And every time they notice the gradient change, they think, okay, this is where I am relative to the hill. This is where the river is. If I get to the river and I notice which way the water's flowing, which is just a different way of saying uphill or downhill, I can find my way. They're not interested in north, south, east, or west, but they are the best I have ever met at making a map in their head just from uphill and downhill. The Pacific Island navigators made maps using clouds, and we can all do this too. This is a photo again that I took very near my home. Clouds form more clearly over islands because islands are warmer than water. They heat up faster in the sunshine. But clouds form over cities. So the next, sunny day, still air, we'll see it a little bit today, a little bit more in summer. You get more of these sorts of clouds you can see here over the city than over the surrounding countryside. So if you're driving in to Bucharest or any other city, you will see these clouds mapping the city from far away. You see more clouds over mountains and hills. You see more of these clouds over dark woodland because it heats up more. But I don't want any of us to think that this is about place. It's not about where the knowledge comes from, and it's not about particular places. It's a philosophy. It's an art. It's the belief that our surroundings are trying to talk to us, are trying to tell us something. And to prove that, I'd like to talk about natural navigation is about being hands-free, but observing things. And the things don't matter. And I really mean that. So have a look at this. This, again, I took near my home, TV satellite dish. Not beautiful, maybe not nature, but it is natural navigation because it's not in our hands. We don't get to choose what is in our environment. Some parts of cities are beautiful, some parts are ugly. But if we know one or two techniques, we can engage with the urban environment in a totally different way. TV satellite dishes point towards the equator. They have to. That's where the satellites are that transmit this sort of data. So it doesn't matter if you're in Bucharest or Brazil. The TV satellite dishes will point towards the equator. And yesterday morning, I had a lovely 3-hour gap in the diary, and I decided to walk from this area to the Palace of Parliament and back. Now, if I'd done it as fast as I possibly could, I definitely could have done that in under an hour. I took over 3 hours in the end. And I'm very happy because I was using the signs in my environment. The sun came out once or twice. I used the trees a little bit, particularly when I was crossing over a park. But mainly, I was using satellite dishes. And it allowed me to tune into the buildings, to appreciate the different architectures, to get a sense, really, of the city that would have been impossible if I was staring at a smartphone. And that's very much what natural navigation is about. It is not a skill for survival. It will help you if you ever, hopefully none of us will ever find ourselves in that situation. I did get lost once on a volcano in Indonesia and walked for 3 days without food, but that's a story for another time. These skills are for every day. They are for adding a layer to a normal day rather than improving a terrible one. And if we learn to do that, what happens is we start with a practical viewpoint and end up by gaining beauty. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in art, a good painting, this is a good painting. And we will look at it and hopefully go, yeah, that's a good painting. There's a bit of beauty there. But if we look at it with the question, which way am I looking? North, south, east, west. We start to form an entirely different relationship. We start to sense things that were hiding in plain sight. So there are enough clues in this picture for us to spend the rest of the festival still finding them. But you will have spotted some already. So we've got a very low moon. The moon, like the sun, rises close to east and west, rises and sets close to east and west. So we must be looking roughly east or west. Then we've got a tree there. You've all spotted it's not symmetrical. It's telling us more light from the left. Okay, so we're west. But there's actually clues in the church. The pattern in the water is something called a glitter path. The shape is telling us that the wind is coming from the left. We could use that to help us find our way. As I say, there are countless clues in it. But what happens is, I think there's a real risk that people talk about left brain and right brain. I think there's sometimes a risk where we lead busy lives. We think, okay, that's a practical skill for solving a practical problem. Now I'm moving into poet, aesthetics, beauty, that side of things. But actually, in my personal experience and a lot of people who feed back to me, that's to miss the joy that comes from understanding the landscape in the way our ancestors did. Because if we tune into a landscape, and it's very easy, if somebody says to you, you should connect with nature, you should spend time in green spaces, that's all very well, but it's abstract and I think unhelpful. But if you walk into a park and say, I'm going to try and find north by looking at this tree, everything else happens. You connect, you immerse, you experience all of the benefits. But you also start to form a connection, a true connection, not a pretend connection. You know, however much we stand in a park with fingers on our temples going, I'm connecting, nothing's happening. But just one little practical exercise and suddenly you have true connection. And that is what we were born to do. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you so much. It was really inspiring. I want to take just a couple questions from the audience. We don't have a ton of time. I will say, though, a lot of this made me remember certain things. Like in cave diving, for instance, there's a bird in the Yucatan called the motmot. And it only nests around cenotes, which are open water places where the ceiling to an underwater cave system has collapsed. And the Mayans used to hear the call of the motmot, and that's why they knew there was water nearby, because it would only nest around there. And I remember when we were exploring some new cenotes with some Mayan guides, I remember at one point we asked them, well, how long could you survive out here with just kind of what you know? And they didn't even understand the question, because for them, it was limitless. It's just like, what do you mean for how long? Like, I got this, I'm good.
Well, that's what I love about natural navigation is in the nicest sense, every day's a school day, because I'd never heard that example. And I'll be pinning you down later, scribbling it down. Yeah.
It's really interesting, and it's a coincidence that we're up here together. Anyway, enough about me and us. Questions from the audience here.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing your adventures. And I want to say that more than your spirit of wandering, I think you're a great storyteller because, for example, I've been wandering a little bit of the world too, but I don't think I have the same capacity of sharing my experiences with such vibrant words.
You do. I can tell already.
Thank you. What I want to ask is, I was once in Thailand with my friends and we were talking about the sunset that we were just seeing. And some of them told me that there might be a correlation between the place where you are in the world and what the sky is showing you. So I'm asking that to you because they were stating the fact that, for example, in Canada, they were seeing more vibrant sunsets, more like the colors were brighter, more vibrant, more lively. And I'm asking you that question.
Yeah, and it's a really lovely way into the appreciation of beauty and subtle differences. Because again, I think we've all had that experience where you go like, oh, beautiful sunset. And then the brain slightly judders to a halt, going like, what do you want me to do with it? You know, but if you know one or two things, like the particles in the air will completely change what are known as aerosols. So there can be natural aerosols like water, or there can be semi-natural ones like smoke from fires, or there can be artificial ones like smog and things like that. But wherever you are in the world, the purity of the air will reduce the redness generally. So if you've got 100% pure air, it's slightly less beautiful sunsets. That's why I noticed when I was coming in to land at Bucharest, I noticed some of the agriculture I saw made me think of sunsets, even though it wasn't sunset time, because it looked like the sort of agriculture that generates a lot of dust at harvest time. And that's why we get amazing August sunsets. It's because of that dust. But there are different angles as well, literally. So the further north you go, the shallower the sunrise and sunset. So if you're at the North Pole, the sun moves horizontally, and if you're at the equator, it moves vertically. What that means is that there's an irony that you get wonderful experiences in the tropics, but they're very short. So you may have had that experience. You're in the tropics, you see an amazing sunset, you go to grab your friend, by the time they've got there, it's all over. Whereas you're shivering up in Sweden or Norway or something, and it goes on and on and on. And you're like, hey, look at this. Okay, what do we do now? We've got 3 hours of this sunset. Yeah. So yes, just knowing little, again, it's the mechanics adds to the beauty. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
One more question.
So I was curious about your trip yesterday in Bucharest. What did you notice in particular? Like any clues that are different from any other parts of the world, or anything in particular that we could look at or pay more attention when walking around?
Well, I spent a lot of my time, thanks for the question, I spent a lot of my time in Northwest Europe, and there are very distinctive wind trends there from the southwest. So for me, it sounds a small, silly thing, but it's really nice to see different wind trends. It's just a little thing, like my brain is so used to seeing patterns and going, that means this, and here I was having to adjust it. In terms of things to look for, I found there's some intriguing different patterns going on in terms of the flow of people. And I haven't yet solved it. So between us, we can solve it, and someone can let me know. But it's part of the joy of getting to know each city is an organism, and we don't get to know an organism instantly, even over 3 hours. But I did notice the flow of people was not what I was necessarily expecting. So in simple terms, if you go against the flow of people in the morning, you normally find a transport hub, like a station or a bus stop or something like this. And if you go with the flow of people late in the day, you find the same thing. In the middle of the day, people are generally moving towards parks and things like that. So there are certain patterns that I'm used to, and I was seeing this kind of flow, and I just couldn't quite work it out. So there's your homework. There's definitely something there. But again, it's not random. An individual bird, an individual human can go and do something very, very strange. When we're individuals, we're kind of like, I'm going to do something crazy today. But groups behave in very predictable ways. So when you see a group of people walking somewhere, there has to be a reason for it. So I'll have to come back, but hopefully with your help, we'll solve it. Yeah, thanks.
We have time for a couple more questions.
Right here.
We're here, yeah, great.
Hello, thank you for the presentation and everything you shared with us. I don't know about you, but I have a couple of friends who believe that the Earth is flat. And I want to ask you, based on everything you know, how can I persuade them wrong?
Okay, there are 2 parts to my answer. The serious and the less so. So the serious thing is the horizon is 1.5 times the square root of your height above ground, in feet. So if you're standing on something that's 3 feet and you're 6 feet tall, you're 9 feet, the horizon, that's in miles. It's a very imperial measure. But basically, there are equations so you can actually prove to somebody, as you climb a tree or go up a building, we all know, you go to the top of a building, the horizon, you see further. So that's the less serious thing is, don't try and change them. Celebrate them. Invite everybody to meet them. I want to meet them. Thank you.
I'd love to hear their arguments for the photo, too. Other questions?
Here. Hi. I was wondering, because you're probably most of the time outside and finding beautiful landscapes, finding nature. How do you bring that into your home, into your interior, and how do you keep a connection with the outside, inside?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I wrote a book many years ago called How to Connect with Nature. And in that, I took the view that there's nature is fascinating, but we only get to that conclusion if we follow a path that is close to our soul, is the only way I can put it at the moment. By which I mean, if we surveyed everybody and said, are you interested in nature? The majority of people, if they're honest, would say, well, maybe not. I don't know. But if you then say, what are you interested in? What I've found is that those interests are a clue to the route into nature. So for example, if you're really into cooking, then foraging is a good way into appreciating nature. If you're really into travel, natural navigation is a really good way in. But interior design is quite a good way in because you start to notice that wood is used in different ways. You know, a pine wood looks very different to a cherry wood and that sort of thing. And then it's only a short step from there, from realizing that actually if you understand, you know, ultimately everything comes from outside in. You know, I mean, we may do all sorts of things like making plastics and all sorts of things like that, but everything is coming from outside in. And there will be a cause and everything that's fundamental outdoors. And so it's really, the way I think about nature appreciation is it's tribal. And when I was 10 or 15, I had no interest in nature at all. It was green stuff that was getting in my way, if I'm honest. So I had to find the thing I found fascinating, but I think it's the same for all of us. And the way I think of it is it's like a pension. It's something you, once you learn your way into nature, you're finding life more interesting, more fascinating and richer. It doesn't cost anything financially, but you're just adding little bits each year. And one thing I have noticed is almost everybody gets there in the end. You know, so whether it's looking at things indoors or not, once you find your way into nature, it is everywhere. So you know, I would say indoors, it's the only answer I can give you off the top of my head at the moment is materials. You know, materials are, you know, that's our very sort of human way of talking about things that are in a landscape. You know, stone. You know, that slate we were looking at earlier, that creates a very nice, you know, placemat on a table, for example. But that's the way I'd encourage, you know, if somebody feels they're a very, you know, interior interested person, it doesn't mean they're not interested in nature. It just means they haven't found that bridge, that, you know, and I think materials might be a good way. Thank you.
We have a question up here.
Hey, thanks for the speech, for the info. I really loved it.
Thank you.
And I'm curious, like finding the cardinal point. It's easier to do, I think, than keeping track of the drift. Like my question is like, how do you keep track of the drift naturally? Like you find the direction, but you can't follow the direction. So then you have to drift. How do you know how much have you drift and you have to correct the drift back in a city, where you have to drift?
Yes, yeah. By drift there, we're talking about coming off track, effectively.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, yeah. Well, the ancient navigators and the Pacific Islanders have a technique for looking back and trying to pick up transits and things like that. I mean, it's not always, I'll be honest, it's not always easy in a city. So I'll come back onto that. But in a wild context, what you're doing is you're looking for transits, which is where any two things line up. So let's say a pointy rock on the beach lines up with the summit of the hill behind it. And then if you come off in a wild context, you look back and you go, those two things don't line up anymore. Now, if you're lucky, you have very, very tall landmarks in a city and you're using them. And I was doing some natural navigation challenges within Marrakesh in Morocco deliberately because it's notoriously the hardest that way. And that's what I was trying to do there is line up the minaret tower on a mosque, you know, maybe with a modern hotel on the edge of the town. And you go long periods and you can't line them up, and then you pop out somewhere and you just try and get a view and you go, I was on that line, but now I'm seeing that one to the left of that one, which means my line is out this way. So there are technical things that work like that. In a broader sense, what works in all environments, but particularly in a city, and what I was doing yesterday morning, is finding my way between handrails generally. So what we do early on in a city is become familiar. Handrails are just linear features that once you see them, you're secure. You know exactly what's going on. So major roads, rivers, things like this. And so sometimes part of the plan is not to be precise. In fact, that's nearly always the plan. You're not precise. You're not saying, I'm exactly on this line. You're saying, I'm in this kind of quadrant, in this area. and I know using satellite dishes, the sun or anything else, I know if I go west, eventually I will hit the river, and then I turn right. That's what the Borneo navigators are doing, and that's what works in cities. So instead of feeling you want to be, because to be honest, if you're trying to hold a line perfectly, you're going to walk into a building quite quickly. so yeah, you're generally, I'd say in natural navigation, in terms of it working, you're 99% of the time, you have a rough idea where you are, but you don't know exactly. But it's okay, because you go, yeah, I'm going to go south until I see that railway line, and then I turn. And that's what actually works, rather than my first 10 years, I was trying to hold lines really strictly. And when it worked, I thought I was doing really well. And lots of times it didn't work. And I thought, this is terrible, none of this works. But actually now, most of the time, you go, I don't know exactly where I am, and that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks. So thank you so much, Tristan.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
You can continue. So Tristan is going to be in the library signing copies of his book. And if you'd like to ask more questions of Tristan there, please join him in the library as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Thanks, Ian.